Tom Hammond and Craig Masbach back at Olympic Stadium in Barcelona, coming up to the men's 400-meter semifinals. Here are the lane assignments. Steve Lewis in lane 3. Top 4 to Wednesday's final. Steve Lewis in lane 3. Roberto Hernandez out quickly in 4. Now down the backstretch.
Ismael on the left of the screen is running very, very quickly. And inside of Lewis, Sunday Bada of Nigeria.
And Derek Redmond of Great Britain has pulled up with an injury. Redmond is out.
Derek Redmond, the British record holder, and an important member of that British 4x400 meter relay team, as he doesn't want anybody to help him.
It'll be Lewis to win in 44.50.
Look at this. He's going to try to finish his semifinal race. The British have a certain tradition of running, which you have to respect.
A bizarre finish to this first semifinal in the men's 400 meters. Derek Redmond of Great Britain pulled up with an injury halfway down the backstretch. He's fighting off those trying to help him to finish the race in his lane. And now the pain too much. Swelling throughout Olympic Stadium as Redmond, with assistance this time, approaches the finish line he had wanted so desperately to reach. That is the Olympic spirit.
That was over 30 years ago. How many remember that happening? Yeah. I've seen it a few times, that clip, since that date, and every time gives me goosebumps. You know, we're in this season of Lent. As we said earlier in the prayer, making our way from Ash Wednesday to the cross to the empty tomb on Easter Sunday. Spending some time working through the gospel according to Mark, just doing one story at a time from the beginning of Jesus' ministry and his baptism, that story that we read last week, until the end of the gospel. And also realizing that last week we ended the Winter Olympics, the 2026. Obviously, this is a Summer Games clip, but I was thinking about the Olympics, and this one came to mind. And it's obviously a really moving clip, but what if I told you that what happened in that clip was a complete and total violation of the rules? I mean, that is not allowed. Your dad can't come out of the stands to help you, no matter what the circumstances are. And believe me, like, there have been times that I have wanted to help out on the field watching my children play soccer or lacrosse, right? Like, I wish I could just help just a little bit, right? Not that I'm some superb athlete, but I understand the impulse to want to help. And then you saw that official who came up. Some of you laughed at this. So, I'm not judging. I'm just saying that there's this official that came up and tried to confront the dad, and he's like, "You can't be here, sir." You could just tell what he was saying, right? You're not supposed to be here, so you're not allowed on the track. Get away, right? And yet we saw something really powerful happen. If it was all about being disqualified for your dad coming down, we would have understood that that's the rules, but it's not really the greater point. That's not really the issue here. We watch that clip, and what we are moved by is not our disgust for a violation of the rules. We do not look at that and say, that's cheating, or that's poor sportsmanship. We look at the bigger picture. So as Amanda talked about so beautifully with the kids a moment ago, let me reiterate what the gospel passage was about today. It's early on in Jesus' ministry. We're only into the third chapter of Mark by this point in the book. Jesus has gathered his disciples, and one day on a Saturday, they are walking through a field of grain. And a few of his disciples, I imagine, are just sort of reaching out and letting the grains touch their hands, and a few of them snap the heads off. And for whatever reason, there were people there observing their behavior. And they called Jesus out on it. They said, "What kind of a teacher are you of the law of Moses if you're going to let your apprentices snap off the heads of grain on the Sabbath?" And Jesus addresses them. And he says, "Look, let me ask you something. Was the Sabbath, the holy day of rest, which, by the way, is a super important part in our identity as Jewish people, is very important in setting us apart from other cultures, and it's time to say the way that God looks on all of us, and the way that our value is determined is not by our productivity, but by whether or not we have hearts for God and concern for our neighbors." So he says this to those who are ridiculing them. Was the Sabbath created for humankind, or was humankind really created to serve the Sabbath? They're not happy with this, because I think they know the answer, but they're also troubled by this. Now we up the ante with the next part of the story, with Jesus now entering the synagogue. He's in a holy place. And there's a man there who's got some sort of condition going on with his hand, whatever exactly a withered hand is. And the man has this condition, and Jesus says, "Reach out your hand." He doesn't say, "Man of God, be healed." He doesn't say, "Let me hold your hands and say some special words over them." He doesn't even say what he says in other parts of the story, which is, "Your faith will make you well." He just says, "Hold out your hand." And the person holds out his hand, which, by the way, doesn't seem like a violation of the Sabbath to lift up your hands. But he does this, and his hand is then healed. And those who are looking on, the Pharisees, are again deeply troubled by this. And they say that that is a step too far. Now, before we just, pile on the Pharisees again, let's take a moment to remember what the Pharisees are all about. Pharisees are going to be responsible in Jesus' time and in the time after for carrying on the synagogue tradition. After the temple in Jerusalem is destroyed in the year 70, now we're talking post-resurrection time period, but it's going to be the Pharisees who keep Judaism moving forward. These are folks who said, look, there are times in our people's history where we have become way too relaxed, we have become way too much a part of the culture of the time, and we have lost our way, and so the way that we understand our identity and the way that we stick to the rules is by following the rules as closely as possible. And so it's hard to be too harsh on them because these people are doing it from the right place. And yet we all understand the idea of what it means to be so committed to following the rules or the letter of the law to a T that we miss the bigger picture. We lose the forest for the trees. Jesus has one of these moments where he is filled with compassion for the man. Who knows how long this man has suffered with this condition with his hands, but Jesus has the ability to put an end to it now. And if that happens on the Sabbath, well, so be it. Because he says that the bigger picture of caring for my neighbor, of reaching out with a compassionate heart to somebody who is suffering, is more important than the actual rules, because the rules are not meant to be the things that are served. The rules are meant to serve the people. Now, I think that this is not a hard concept for us to grasp. But the truth of the matter is that we will all struggle with this at some time or another. Because we look at the example of that race of Derek Redmond and his father Jim, and we say, that was somebody that got it right. We all look back on that event. Most people who witnessed that have no idea who won gold. But you remember that, don't you? You remember that story. 30-some years of Olympics have happened since that date. And that one is one of the ones that are burned into your memory. So there will be times in our lives that we will struggle with something, right? There will be a thing that we say, oh my gosh, they're being ridiculous. Don't they see the bigger picture is about an issue of compassion? And it's so obvious to us. Until it comes down to something that we feel particularly strongly about, super passionate about, and then it's hard for us to be the ones who are willing to extend that same kind of grace. When will it happen? Will it be a social issue, a matter of politics? Will it be a party affiliation thing? Will it be a thing where it's a parenting issue? Where you extend a certain degree of compassion to your child, but then they do something and you think, no, and your spouse is like, hey, back off a little bit. It's not the end of the world. Anybody's spouse ever had to do that to you? All of you? Yes, of course, right? There's been another thing where you were called out on it. Maybe it was a situation at work. You said, nah, if there's no standards and there's no rules, then it's a slippery slope to ruin, right? It's all chaos if we don't follow the rules, even though you know that to show a little bit of compassion in this moment makes the right amount of sense for the good of the culture, of the community, of the group, of the workplace, of the school, of the family life. So I think it's true that we all struggle with this. So we could cast stones at the Pharisees, but let's be honest. It's going to come back at us at some point. But Jesus sets the tone for his ministry. Chapter 3. And he shows us that when push comes to shove, what is the bigger priority? It is going to be caring for the other. Caring for someone who is suffering. Showing compassion is the thing that overrules everything else, including the customs, the laws, the social conventions, all of those things that are long-held, deeply ingrained things. Jesus says, yes, but we can be flexible when it comes to showing compassion. On the 20-year anniversary of that race in Barcelona, London hosted the Summer Olympics. And I don't know if you picked up on it, but the Redmonds are English folks. And Mr. Redmond, Jim, was asked if he would be a torchbearer for the Olympics in London. I got to thinking about how I love that symbolism, right? It wasn't even the athlete that got invited back as the hero to represent his country. It was the compassionate father who was the one who did an even greater job representing the spirit of the games. And aren't we called also to be light bearers? Isn't that one of the metaphors that we use time and time again in the church? Aren't we, as followers of Jesus, called to be keepers, bearers of the light, a city on a hill, sharing the light? And in a world where there's so much friction, so much us versus them, emphasizing differences constantly, what the world needs more now is light bearers, shining their light through the compassion of Jesus Christ. I invite you, I challenge you to be on the lookout in the coming days for an opportunity to show compassion. They exist all the time, but we pass over them. We want to maybe be a little too strict in our interpretation of the rules. Where are there opportunities to show grace? Where can we be light bearers? Where can we carry the torch of Christ into the darkness that so often needs to be illuminated with the love that only God can offer? Will you pray with me?